Hello, it is on this day, August 5th, 2022, that I am again answering the question, can asexual people be kinky? Before we answer that question, I have two disclaimers for you. Number one, I won't actually be answering the question of can asexual people be kinky for the entirety of this video. I'll only be answering that question in like 1 to 2 sentences, and then I'll be diving into misconceptions, my perspective, adjacent topics, and a quick shout out at the end. So this is a very scattered video is what I want to say right now at the beginning. My second disclaimer, along the same lines of being scattered, I struggle to talk about this. I may stutter, I may ramble, I may say a lot, I may pause a lot. It's all because this is something I am passionate about, but it's something that I struggle to talk about. It's something that I haven't really had much time to talk about out loud before. So bear with me, this is new for me, but it's something I want to do in the future. On that note, let's answer the question, can asexual people be kinky? Yes, 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 yes. Asexual people can be kinky. This is kind of getting ahead of myself. I will talk about this more in the my perspective part, but right off the bat, I want to say that ace people can be pretty much anything. Kinky people can be pretty much anything. These are really, really, really broad umbrellas, and of course they can overlap. To me, this is now and of course. It wasn't always to me. This is something I had to learn, but now that I have the understanding I have, of course these identities can coincide. I think pretty much any identity can coincide with either of these labels. There you go. Why is this important to me? Every time I've talked about this in my various takes, I ramble a lot. I'm going to try to keep it very short in this version. This is important to me because it's confused me for a freaking long time. There are many layers to why this bothers me. There are many layers why I was asking this question to myself for so long. There are many layers why I think it is very important that I talk about this. But I think the broad is that it's because this confused me for so long. It's because if someone had told me this earlier on, I could have accepted myself much sooner, and I honestly may not have a lot of the issues that I have with still doubting my ace identity, with still doubting my kink identity, and with feeling like an imposter to both of those communities. I know fundamentally that I shouldn't feel like I'm an imposter to the ace community because I know other people in the ace community that feel the same way as me. I know I shouldn't feel like an imposter to the kink community because I know other people in the kink community that are ace. But I still feel like sometimes people perceive me that way. People perceive me as an imposter. And because of that, I want to get this video out, say, hey, people like me exist. Hey, this is a perfectly valid experience. Hey, if you are also feeling this way and you have some of those feelings, it's okay. And feel free to talk to me. I am perfectly fine with talking about this stuff. Throughout this video also, if you have any questions about any of the things I mentioned, and if you want to learn more about these things, honestly, the person I'll shout out at the end of this video is a better education resource than me, but I am open to talking about these things. So, there you go. With that, let's get into misconceptions. On the ace side, there are misconceptions that ace sexuality is all about being uninterested in sex and about not wanting sex. There is the misconception that all ace people are sex repulsed, that all ace people are prude, that all ace people aren't even willing to say the word kink. There are misconceptions that ace people can't be in relationships. And there are misconceptions that if someone is asexual, then they don't feel any kind of attraction. All of those are wrong. On the other side, we have the misconception that being kinky is all about having sex. We have the misconception that sex for people can't... Sex for people? God. Sex repulsed people can't be kinky. Misconception. There's misconceptions that kink is all about how you interact with other people, that it has to be with another person, that it has to be in a sexual relationship. Misconception. And it's also a misconception that if you are with someone, then you must have sexual attraction to that person in order to interact with them in a kinky way. Misconception. to go down that and correct each one individually, you can't blanket statement the ace community, because as I said at the beginning, it's a freaking huge umbrella. Pretty much every label can exist in the ace community. Pretty much. It would be hard to find a label that no one in the ace community identifies with, because it's such a broad community. It's a really broad community. It's kind of like the gender community. People in the gender community can have all kinds of freaking labels across the entire LGBTQ plus community. And in general, there are huge overlaps between people. If you were to draw all the circles of all the umbrella terms, there is a middle where people can be pretty much all of them. So, blanket statementing and saying nobody in the ace community can be interested in sex, you're wrong, because there are all kinds of people in the ace community, including people who are interested in sex, and there is a label specifically about that in the ace community called cupiosexual, which is an ace person, fully asexual, who still participates in sex, has sexual relationships, etc., etc., etc. Don't make blanket statements, and you won't fall into this misconception or many of the other misconceptions here. Asexuality is about your sexual attraction, pretty much. Not everybody defines it that way, that's fine, but if you wanted to have the closest to a blanket definition, it's about sexual attraction, and people's sexual attraction can be anywhere. And asexuality in and of itself is a spectrum. So also view this as a spectrum we are looking at. But this entire video applies to ace people and the ace spectrum. Next, all ace people are sex repulsed. Same thing, you can't assume that about all ace people. Not all ace people are prude either. You can't assume that about all ace people. I know ace people that are more crude than allosexual people I know. There are people of all kinds out there. You can't just assume all the people in this massive umbrella is one thing, because they're not. Third, ace people aren't willing to be in relationships. Okay, first of all, the broad level, asexual people can still be in sexual relationships, as I kind of covered. On the next level, ace people can still have romantic relationships, queer platonic relationships, emotional relationships, etc., etc., etc. They can have relationships of all kinds. And also, there are allosexual people who have relationships with people that they aren't sexually attracted to. And that's fine. I think that gives a whole nother perspective to all these misconceptions, looking at it as, hey, there are allosexual people that are the ways that you're assuming. There are allosexual people who are sex repulsed. There are allosexual people who hate sex or are uninterested in sex. They're not ace. They can still be allosexual, but still have those experiences. It's a different way to look at it, and I think that can be helpful sometimes. And I kind of covered it already, but just to make sure I got it, ace people can, because they don't feel sexual attraction, they can't feel other types of attraction. That's wrong, because ace people can have their attraction be different, and they can feel different types of attraction for different kind of people, and that's fine. On the kink side, kink is not about having sex necessarily. Some people define all of the kinks as having sex. That's kind of a personal definition kind of thing in that case. But if you think about your definition of what sex is, and if it's anything like mine, there are a frick ton of kinks that have nothing to do with having sex. And you can do research into that. You can educate yourself on that. That's really up to you, but in general, kink isn't about having sex, and being kinky doesn't mean you have to have had sex before, because you can be kinky without ever participating in kink. Next one, sex repulsed people can be kinky. Sex repulsed people can be kinky. I've met 2 sex repulsed people in my life. One of them is kinky, one of them is okay with participating in kink, and I'm talking about people who are sex repulsed all the time, unlike me where I'm only sometimes sex repulsed. They are still kinky, they are still very comfortable with talking about that, or comfortable with participating in kink, whether or not they are kinky. And I can't really convey to you all the knowledge I've gained from them, but if you ever meet someone who is sex repulsed and is comfortable with kink, that's an opportunity for you to learn something from them possibly. And I can tell you that I've really enjoyed these conversations I've had, and I feel I've learned a lot as a person just taking in their identity and accepting them, and also just supporting them for it. Next, you don't have to be in a relationship to participate in kink. I mean, here's one way to look at it. You can practice kink by yourself. Done. You don't have to be in a relationship to participate in kink. And even if you are in a relationship, or, I mean, you can participate in kink with someone that you don't know, and you can also participate in kink with someone that you don't have a sexual relationship with, but you have another kind of relationship. All valid and fine. Up to you, up to the individual. Individual people can make their individual choices. And then, along the same lines, you can also have physical attraction for someone and participate in kink with them. You can experience emotional attraction with someone and experience kink with them. You can experience no type of attraction with them and participate in kink with them. And some people actually, who can't feel any kind of attraction, can still enjoy having kink as a replacement for that interaction, if that makes sense. But individual experience, individual basis, I can't convey that to you, but if you ever meet someone who feels that way and has that kind of experience, that's an opportunity for you to understand that and talk to them about it if they are comfortable sharing. Those are all the big misconceptions I wanted to address. There are many more out there. These are both vastly misunderstood communities on their own, let alone together, but those are the misconceptions I wanted to cover in this video. My perspective is going to cover the rest of the misconceptions, and my perspective is basically saying you can't make blanket statements about either of these communities because they are huge umbrellas. There are people of all kinds in both of these umbrellas, and humans are complex. We all have our own fingerprints. We all have our own experiences. I'm making an analogy there. And we're all different in some kind of way. And if you gather a group of people, you're going to have a lot of different experiences in there. So making assumptions that everybody in a big group of people is one way is likely going to be inaccurate. And even saying that with the definition of the label, you're still probably not getting everybody, because not everybody falls in with the same definition. And that's fine. As long as we just have these guiding ideas, we can kind of group ourselves in these umbrellas and still find out that, hey, even though there are all kinds of different people in an umbrella, we can still relate. We can still have similarities between us. We can still talk about how we have similar experiences and how we are treated, even if we have different experiences in our attraction, etc., etc., etc. So the big idea I want to get across in this video is that the ace community has all kinds of people in it. All kinds of people in it. And all of these questions that are saying, can ace people be blank? Can ace people be blank? Can ace people be blank? Most of those questions, the answer is yes. Period. Because you can also phrase it in terms of, can allo people be blank? Can allo people be blank? And you're going to get yes. It's a huge group of people. There's a lot of experiences within it. Kink community is also the same way. The other thing I want to comment about my perspective is returning back to the beginning of this video about imposter syndrome. Sometimes I'll be talking to other asexual people in a community and get a DM from someone, and it's something along the lines of, I doubt that you are ace because you experienced this. That's kind of paraphrasing, but if you were to group all the times that happened and combine it into one sentence, that's the closest I can get. Some people approach this discussion with doubt, even as an ace person. Ace people can approach this discussion and be like, I doubt your experience because it's not mine. And some people don't understand how broad these groups can be. Some people still think that asexuality is all about willingness to have sex, and some people still think that kink has to be revolving around sex. And therefore, other ace people can't be kinky. I've gotten over those discussions, but in the moment, sometimes that can hurt. And sometimes it can just be frustrating. It feels like we are still behind. It feels like even though we should be a very accepting community, because we are the community with a frick ton of different types of people, it feels like we should be a lot more accepting of each other. But sometimes it's just not happening, and it's just frustrating. But generally, if you're approaching these discussions, the best way to approach them is with an open mind and acknowledging that, hey, you can't assume that someone else's experience is invalid because you aren't experiencing it. You aren't in their shoes. And so I think it's best to just accept someone else's experience for what they say it is, because you're not going to be able to be in their shoes. And we can only recommend things to people. We can only recommend labels to people if you do that. Ask people permission first. We can't say this is the word for your experience because we don't know that. We aren't in their experience fully. So, again, humans are complex people. I think looking at things in terms of educating, looking at things in terms of having a genuine conversation rather than making an argument, rather than saying someone isn't something, is much better. And to those people, I just want to say that ace people understand being ace because they're ace. Period. It doesn't matter what their outside experiences are. Ace people understand being ace. Done. Lastly, I said at the beginning of the video, but just a reminder, feel free to ask me questions. I am fine with being DM'd for the most part. If you know me personally, go ahead. If you don't have my Discord, leave a comment and I might give it to you. Feel free to ask me questions about this, even if this is something I struggle to talk about in like a public standpoint. As long as it's clear that you genuinely want to learn, you genuinely are interested in talking about this in a genuine conversation, then I can like loosen up and really get rambling on this kind of thing. So feel free to ask me questions if you have any. Quick adjacent topics. Ace people can be sex workers. Nothing wrong with that. It happens. Period. There are all kinds of people in the ace community. If you look, you will find all kinds of different people. So just a statement that ace people can be sex workers, and it happens, and it's fine. I just want to say that that exists. Next, neither ace people or kinky people, neither of these two communities as a whole, have to have sex to know they are those things. You don't have to have sex to know you're kinky. A lot of people know they're kinky at a very young age. You don't have to have sex to know you're asexual. First of all, because asexuality isn't about having sex. But second of all, because you don't. And third of all, sex repulsed people don't have to have sex to tell you that they are sex repulsed. There you go. An analogy that someone used that I really appreciate is, how do you know you wouldn't want to hug a cactus? Go hug a cactus and find out. It's along the same lines. If you think about it from that perspective, that explains it. Next, kink can be a tool for people who identify as asexual, people who identify as sex repulsed, people who identify as other various things. Some people appreciate kink. Some people use kink as a way to connect with their partner, whether or not they are kinky themselves. It still can be something they can use to connect to people. It's still something people use to get around sex or get around things they are repulsed by or to get around things they are uncomfortable with. Some people use kink as a way to kind of break the ice or really get to know someone on a different level or kind of create an understanding. There's a lot of different ways that people use kink, and I can't convey them. I won't be able to give the most examples in the world, but I can tell you the sex repulsed person I mentioned earlier in this video explained to me how kink is something that helps them be able to get around their sex repulsion. And I think that's fascinating to me, and you can learn a lot more about that. It's hard to find, but if you find someone, ask if they're comfortable sharing. It can be really helpful to your own identity, possibly. Possibly. Depends on you. Next, something that some people don't understand is that vanilla people can participate in kink. Because here's just one example. If your partner is into kink and you're not into kink, but when your partner comes to something with something they want, comes to you with something they want to try, you don't have any problems with it, you're fine doing it, you know they will enjoy it, and you say yes, that is a vanilla person participating in kink, and that is also perfectly fine and valid. So, another perspective to look at in this video. And lastly, ace people are not an excuse for kink to not be at Pride. This is a discussion that happens every year. The person I will shout out at the end of the video has an entire video about that if you want to go watch that. But ace people aren't your excuse for kink to not be at Pride, because of this whole video is why. Pretty much. This whole video is why. If you want to try to make that argument, you would want to say people disgusted by sex don't want kinky people at Pride. And even then, you are wrong, because there are sex repulsed people who are still comfortable with kink at Pride. There are people disgusted by sex that still support the idea, hey, these people need to be seen. So, invalid argument, grr. And something I want to say about that is that the most ace flags I saw at Pride in one place was in the leather group and in the pup group in Pride Parade. So I'm just saying the most ace flags I saw was in the kink groups. Period. Done. Anyway, to circle back around to the beginning of this video, I am making this video to say that this overlap exists. Many overlaps along these lines exist, and they're all fine and valid. And it's okay to be kinky, it's okay to be ace, it's okay to be kinky and sex repulsed, it's okay to be kinky and sex ambivalent. It's all okay, and even though these discussions are something that are hard to come by, it's hard to bring up to people, I just want you to know that you aren't the only one. Even if you don't see it, even if you don't get to talk about it, there are many more people out there. And the goal of this channel, as I said in my channel introduction, is to just be another resource out there for people, so that people walking along my path don't have to be as confused as I was. So if you want me to talk more about this and share more of my personal experience with figuring out this part of myself, I can share that if you are interested and be that resource for people. If you dig, you will find there are actually a fair amount of ace kinky people on the internet and even on YouTube. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit because of the nature of YouTube, but there are many out there. And there are also people with asexuality channels, just focusing on asexuality, that make it very clear that kink is accepted in asexuality, and I really appreciate those channels as well. I am linking 2 channels in the description, but I'm only shouting out one of them. The channel I'm shouting out is Watts the Safeword, WATTS the Safeword. It's a podcast on Spotify and other podcast services. It's on YouTube. They have their own website. They have adjacent things like the Cigar Lounge and other groups that you can go participate in. They are basically a kinky sex education channel organized by a demisexual person, and they have a lot of videos about education and topics adjacent to this. He has a video specifically talking about his demisexuality along with his participation in kink, his kink identity, and his work as a sex worker. If you would like to go watch that video specifically, I think that's a great place to start, honestly. And he also just has a lot of videos about being really open about these things. And even when at first how do I word this? You can tell throughout his videos he's getting an even more broad perspective of how many people are in kink. And even though it's headed by a gay couple, they're starting to include other kinds of couples and other analysis in their discussion about kink. So there's that. I really respect Amp as a person, the demisexual person who leads the channel. And this channel has helped me so much over the last year with accepting my own identity. So if you're curious, I think you can go ahead and take a gander. If you're not curious, then you don't have to. But I'm just saying that even as a sex repulsed person, if there's anything I'm uncomfortable with, which honestly it's been very rare, the way they talk about things just comes off naturally, and it's very rare that I feel uncomfortable, but if I do, I can just skip that section and come back another time, and it all turns out fine. So I really appreciate their channel, and I just want to give a shout out to them at the end of this video. That was all I had today. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.